Hello there, everybody. Welcome to something a little new for myself and my colleague here. We're trying a podcast for the very first time. Um, yeah,
It's a different one. It's a different type of thing that we usually do. We're usually focused on doing the whole YouTube thing. But this is exciting.
Y-
Really looking forward to kicking into this.
yeah. Like podcasts are bigger than ever at the moment. It's a new form of I suppose content, a new form of entertainment, new form of engaging with fans, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
All three of you. We have one very adamant commenter on our stuff, so he's definitely working. Shout out to that guy, you fucking
Christopher, he's awesome. He's awesome.
Yeah, you're our hero, Chris.
We love you, man.
Kisses. So yeah, I suppose. Well, first of all, let's introduce ourselves for anybody that's new out there, maybe just joining us on the podcasty side of things. We are a couple of lads. We call ourselves the Save Point. My name on the Save Point is Shephard.
And my name on the Save Point is Joker. And we really took those kind of usernames from two franchises that really have made such a massive impact on us in our gaming lives, I suppose. My co-host Shephard, he took the name after Commander Shephard from the Mass Effect trilogy. And that's how I got into Mass Effect, was from the man himself here. And I took the name Joker from my favorite game of all time, which is Persona 5. Again, another title that Shephard, my co-host, introduced me to, which I am eternally grateful to him for doing so. But we usually did these kind of long visual videos on YouTube, and it's unfortunate because how we did go about recording them, it's become more of a tedious kind of thing now. We were kind of stuck on how to go about recording again, just because of the recording software that we did use. It just wasn't applicable for us to do it anymore.
We had to jump through so many hoops just to get the last video out in the first place. And in between that video and where we're at now, and that video was about 2 months ago that was released, bearing in mind the editing time for our videos is 3 to 4 weeks already. Yeah. So it's been probably 3 months since we actually
did something like
content.
This.
Yeah. Not even publishing content, produced content.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent a significant amount of time over the last few weeks just trying to hammer out the issues and figure out how best to proceed with the channel. The YouTube channel is still there, and we intend to get back to that when we can. But we had been discussing about doing a podcast in the first place anyway. So we're like, well, look, we have the opportunity to do that now. Let's get started on this, and we can feed into the YouTube channel. If people want to come over from there and listen to us on Spotify, we'll also share this content to that YouTube channel. If you're only going to listen to us on Spotify, more power to you. You consume your content how you like. But I suppose as this is the inaugural podcast of the Save Point,
episode 1.
Episode 1.
Yeah.
The Phantom Save Point.
The Phantom Point
podcast. Yeah, the Phantom Point. Wouldn't you know, for our very first one, we decided to go with something a little spicy, a little controversial.
This is going to get us into trouble. This is going to get us into trouble.
So we're going to each list 6 of our gaming hot takes. Now, there's no shortage of this kind of stuff online. People are always talking about stuff that peeves them off or whatever. Our approach here is not necessarily going to be, we're not attacking anybody. We're not, anyone with a different opinion to me is wrong. That's not what we're trying to say here. It's very much, we just have some things that we think that maybe other people, the majority, probably don't agree with. And we just want to air those out. And some of them might not even be complaints. They could be, oh, hey, I like this thing. Or I would appreciate something done differently. The variety of our topics is fairly good. We don't know each other's topics either. So this will be a discussion. Yeah, it'll be a nice surprise for each of us hearing what the other has to say.
It's very off the cuff. It really is, because we each have come up with like these kind of 6 topics or points in the video game narrative that really kind of rub us the wrong way. And it's not to say that like they could inherently be a bad thing. It's just that these are things that we have a sort of a problem with. We've done something like this on our YouTube channel, which was like the 6 moments in gaming that terrified us, and it was so off the script on how we usually do these kind of topics that it kind of kept more of an interesting flow to the dialogue. So
absolutely.
And I think it's important as well to say as well, Shepherd, is like these are not like number one is this, number two is this. These are just like our 6 points. They're not numerically done in any certain way. Like this is the worst one or this is like the least worst one. You know?
No, absolutely. It's as Joker said, it's off the cuff. It's very much we just have 6 items each. I've written 10, but that's because I'm a very salty person. But I'm only going to do 6. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a part 2 if we come up with more spicy takes or if people like this.
Exactly.
And then you'll hear the rest. But I suppose the big thing is it's like I said, like was said before. It's a discussion. It's not a debate. It's not an argument. It's not we're not after anybody here. It's just we wanted to kind of talk about stuff that's been just something on our minds, kind of interesting subjects that we think are kind of fun to talk about, which is what we do on our YouTube channel as well.
Yeah.
As Joker said, we've done a similar kind of list video before. We didn't know what was on each other's list then. And as a result, it actually allowed for some surprises, some genuine reactions to things. Joker might give me a point on, I haven't actually played that game. I wasn't aware that this was a thing. And now I'm kind of more inclined to check it out. And so it's a big part of the fun for us is the kind of spontaneity of it, the lack of scripting. There's scripted content out there that works really well. Ours isn't that kind of content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I suppose, shall we kick it off?
Yeah, let's go ahead. So I think I'm just going to drop one on you right now.
Go for it.
That's what she said. But I'm definitely going to drop this one. And this is one that I knew I was going to have first and I wasn't going to change it. And the one for me actually is people don't know the difference between a remake and a remaster. And I'm sorry, I'm dropping it off right now. Okay, so that's number one for me.
This is something we've talked about before.
This is the biggest pet peeve of mine that I have. And you see it all the time when like big gaming titles like Naughty Dog will re-release The Last of Us for the newest generation of console because it came out on PlayStation 3 and it came out twice. And guys, take it from me, never go into the YouTube or Facebook comment section about these kind of things because I've gotten into so many catfights about this. And it's like I see people saying, oh, they're going to remake the story because they're remaking for like a next console. And it's like, guys, they're not doing that. What they're doing, what all you're getting is like the same game essentially with tighter controls, better camera mechanics, more fluidity to the combat, but like the story generally stays the same. Remasters are so dangerous in that sense where you get these great trailers with like flashing graphics and great CGI cutscenes and like elevated combat mechanics and all this, and it's like it's still the same game. It's just being like repainted for like the next generation of console. And it's, in my opinion, though, it's such a shady way for companies to like earn an extra buck off you. Now, I know there's other titles out there. Like I know the Spider-Man that came out there a few years back also had a choice where you could download a free almost extension of that game to port it over to the PS5, and that didn't cost anything extra. But you've got these other big AAA companies who will say, The Last of Us remastered HD collection or HD port for the PS5, and nothing has changed except a lighting update and probably better facial graphics. And yet people still go on this whim of it's a complete remaster or it's a complete remake. It's not a remake at all. Like the best example I could give of when a title has been completely remade from the ground up, and Shepherd and I have talked about this in the past, is a great example of that is what Resident Evil 1 did for the GameCube. Like that was a remake. Like it was built from the ground up with current generation graphics for the time, a brand new area that you could explore and get lost in new enemy types with the Crimson Heads, with Lisa Trevor as well as being one of the important characters, a new character, mind you, and a very important boss fight, and overall extremely important to the lore of the Spencer Mansion. But that was a remake. It wasn't a remaster. The same can go with Final Fantasy VII Remake. They've taken the original story and built on that and added in all these new mechanics for current generation consoles. But I would say 90% of people, when they see remaster, immediately they think remake.
On what you're saying actually about Final Fantasy VII, it's a remake up to a certain point as well, and then it's actually a brand new game.
Yes, yeah.
much like the Resident Evil 1 remake, it's like, okay, they remade it. And the layout of the Spencer Mansion at first is quite similar. But of course, as you said, there's like new mechanics, and visually enhanced in so many different ways, new voice acting and everything. And then there is the new stuff with Lisa Trevor and the new sections of the game. And again, it becomes a new game in that sense. And I think that's kind of, when it comes to remakes, the important thing with a remake for me is to elevate the original.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to do the original game again. What's the point of doing the original game again if it's supposed to be a remake? Like Resident Evil kind of continued the trend with the Resident Evil 2 remake.
And 3.
Yeah, we don't talk about that one.
Yeah, but they're just doing the 4th one as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and like potentially that might be really good. It's Resident Evil 4 though is a touchy subject in and of itself, because the original game kind of set the standard for third person action games for basically for the remainder of everything ever.
Yeah, it's called one of the greatest games of all time for a reason, isn't it?
Yeah. I've completed it over 300 times.
I played it once. I played it once with a good friend of mine, and it was one of those games that we played on like those really cold October evenings when it was like super cold outside and you're huddled around the TV and things like that, and that was a great experience, you know. And that was actually the first proper Resi game I played. I'll get back to why it was my first proper Resi game on another point that I have. But just going back to the whole remake remaster thing, like granted, it can be done exceptionally well if it's like a great example of that is the Mass Effect Legacy Edition, where it was 3 games, but you can tell they put a lot of time into the first game, because the first game, as great as it was for the time, it doesn't really hold up as well nowadays if you play the original. The camera angles and the controls are extremely wobbly and all this kind of thing, and but you can tell that that's where the meat of their focus was on that title, and it holds up great now. It really does. That's a remaster. You're remastering the controls, tightening everything up. It's not a remake though. The story is still the same.
I totally get what you mean. And to be fair, benchmark for remasters is that Mass Effect Legendary Collection. It's top tier.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd be inclined to agree in pretty much every respect, because remakes are generally meant to be almost a new game built on what came before. So a remaster is more, here is the old content upscaled for a new generation of consoles.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, you know, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes you get people maybe didn't get to play it the first time around for whatever reason. Like with The Last of Us as an example. The PS4 remaster of that game, a lot of people didn't get to play it back on the PS3. So releasing it on PS4, that's fine. And then remaking it for PS5, it's just like remaking it. Yeah, quote unquote remake. Yeah, absolutely. It's an expensive cash grab, because they did redo the motion capture and shit like that. But it's still,
did they?
Apparently, they redid the motion capture. They redid the voice acting. So so that's the thing, right?
What was wrong with it though?
Exactly. See, this is the problem with that game for me. Is in essence they remade the game, because they remade all of the assets from the ground up, but they remade them as just better versions of what came before. So it's still the original game from what I can tell. I don't think they added any new content or new areas. Maybe they expanded on some of the size of areas or something like that. But it's fundamentally the same game.
But what about then the Silent Hill remake, remaster collection? You could classify those as remakes then, because they brought in Troy Baker and somebody else.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Konami lost the code for Silent Hill 2.
Oh, it was an old code. That's what it was. So technically, that was a remake then.
So they had to more or less remake the assets for that game.
But it's called a remaster.
Yeah. It's also crap.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. No, we don't talk about that.
But yeah, I think that's another example of, well, it's still listed as a remaster because it's the same game, but worse. Now, to be fair, I haven't played The Last of Us quote-unquote remake, so I can't comment on the quality of it.
Yeah.
But that said, Naughty Dog are, credit where credit's due, Naughty Dog are, like, they have an enormous amount of polish in their games. There's not...
Yeah, like the Uncharted Drake's Uncharted 4 A Thief's End was like that for me was like, that's Naughty Dog at their finest.
Yeah,
like that game is it's incredibly well done, and like it's even like they tightened up, but then you're tightening up something that's like had 3 previous games and 2 spin-off games in that franchise anyway. So of course they're going to have it polished right towards the end. But
they also have the backing of Sony as being like one of their major first-party
developers.
exactly.
They're going to pump.
Basically they have a blank check.
Yeah. Give us a number and that kind of thing. But I suppose what about yourself though? Like the what have you got to kind of add more gasoline to the bonfire of hatred that we have going? I know it's more criticism than anything else, but like what have you got for me?
I've seen this one kind of bandied about online a bit, and I'd be interested to know your opinion on it.
Oh,
and it actually relates to your favorite game. Not directly.
Tread very carefully.
Your favorite game falls under the category of what I'm going to mention.
JRPGs?
Oh, no, it's actually not specific to JRPGs, but it is a factor in a lot of JRPGs. I hate silent protagonists.
Right, I can understand why. Okay.
For me, I understand the idea of why silent protagonists are often popular or used fairly often in a lot of, particularly in the likes of RPGs and JRPGs. And people say they're more immersive. It's like, oh, it's an avatar for the player, then it's not. And I'm sorry, I don't personally buy into that. I get the mentality, but I don't buy into it.
Right.
Prime example, Dead Space 1.
Isaac
Clarke is a silent protagonist in the first game, voice protagonist in 2 and 3.
And in the remake, he's now fully voiced, I believe, right?
Now fully voiced. But that
is a proper remake, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it interconnects the USG Ishimura, adds new areas, new combat mechanics, new gameplay mechanics in general.
New weapons and things and stasis upgrades you can get and shit. Yeah, okay.
It's a new thing. It's essentially a new game built on the foundation of Dead Space 1. Now, some people said they didn't like that Isaac became a voice protagonist in Dead Space 2. I'm sorry, I don't find it immersive when the protagonist doesn't say shit. Because if I'm playing a horror game and my character isn't fucking reacting to what's happening around them, how is that immersive?
Yeah,
I know that I'm reacting. I know that I'm involved in what's happening in the moment. But I find it so goddamn irritating. Like, I know Ethan Winters gets flack for in Resident Evil 7 and 8.
But he was voiced.
He was voiced, but he gets a lot of flack for the awkward delivery of his voice lines, which is a Resident Evil staple. So shut up.
Silent Hill is the same as that as well.
Yeah, it's stilted and awkward, but it fits into the kind of unsettling charm.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah,
but I also acknowledge when voice acting is just bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I prefer, like, for example, Persona 5. I love that game.
Mm-hmm.
I wish Joker spoke.
Yeah, I can understand why then.
It's and again, you're given like dialogue options in the game.
Yeah.
Even if he was voiced and just voiced the dialogue options you picked, I would be happy with that.
That's fair.
But the problem is that
I agree with that.
As a result of this long running, so Persona 5 is an example. I again adore the game. I cannot stress that enough. Yeah, and I also can't stress enough. This is just opinions.
Oh yeah,
you may disagree, and that's totally cool. I respect the shit out of you for that, and not just you, whoever's watching / listening.
Yeah.
Persona 5, the character of Joker, or Akira as he's known in the official manga, goes through a hell of a lot. And he has a kind of clearly defined personality. He's rebellious, but also heroic. Fairly standard JRPG stuff. But he doesn't react. So, like, it's more implied personality traits as opposed to things he actually says and does throughout the game.
There's actually a part, now that you mentioned that, like, that he doesn't react. There's a part when you're in the first palace and it's Kamoshida's castle, and you're in the jail area. And as he's like becoming one with his persona Arsene, he rips the mask off of his eyes, but doesn't scream or anything like that. And there's blood pumping out of the sockets of his eyes. And yet you have Ryuji Sakamoto, who's like the same age as you, like being like, "What the F is going on?" And because like he's a teenager, and you know yourself when you're a teenager, you're already feeling a little bit conflicted in yourself anyway. Like you're going to be vocal about a lot of things. Like I certainly was when I was a teenager.
Yeah, too right.
Yeah, like I mean, it's just I can understand that, and then it does fall under the argument of, but like he's supposed to be an insert for the player. But you made a good point there that it would be pretty cool if like the voice actor had voiced the 3 dialogue options you could give, and but that would kind of then, would it ruin the flow of the conversation between yourself and the other character? It might seem a bit strange if the voice actor was pronouncing things or pacing his response like a few seconds beforehand. Do you know what I mean?
Potentially, like that is also a factor to consider. Now, an argument could also be made is that, again, like, he's supposed to be the avatar for the player, not a character in his own right. And then in that instance, I would personally feel like, well, why not make Joker why not have the option to choose your gender then? If you really want to make a player character that you can really imprint yourself on,
That's
why not have a bit more character customization?
That's a good point.
But then back to Mass Effect.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, Commander Shephard. Now, again, Commander Shephard is a character with a storied history. They are a pre-established character in the universe of Mass Effect, so I can understand that they have to be voiced to an extent. Plus, every character in the game is voiced.
Yeah,
there's not a single piece of dialogue in that game that doesn't have a voice attached to it, which I love.
Or sound out of place when you do choose the dialogue option that you want.
Yeah, I should go.
Well, bang, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, like it's more of a pet peeve as opposed to like, this fucking sucks. Like other games, like what I'm recently replaying, Skyrim. Your character is not voiced in that game, and for a game like that, I almost kind of don't mind it, because I suppose it's different because your character is completely a blank slate. They don't have a personality all their own. And the other element is that your character dialogue options in the Elder Scrolls games are never particularly deep. It's not like usually you just pick from the list of options and you're on your way. I can't speak for games before Oblivion because I haven't played them. But in Elder Scrolls 4 and 5, yeah, your characters are fairly surface level anyway.
Yeah, there's not that much deep level of like, but why am I doing this? Or it's mostly just like, have you like, where do I need to go? And then knowing a little bit more about the person who's giving you that quest and why they're giving you this quest. There's no like grandiose, like thought-provoking dialogue that comes out of it, and you're never given that option.
Well, it's a sandbox. It's not meant to, like, there is a narrative to follow, but generally speaking, it would be kind of awkward for a well-established character to kind of jump in and out of that narrative willy-nilly. Like, it's a common complaint about Fallout 4 is the ludonarrative dissonance, where your character is like, I have to find my son. I'm going to build a society on the other side of the world, and that has a voice protagonist that. There's a lot of time the dialogue just doesn't match with the tone or the mood of the moment, I suppose.
A lot of the time it didn't make sense in that game. Now, I've played through Fallout 4 multiple times, and I must say I probably fall into the fine line of players who really enjoyed that game.
I do, absolutely.
I thought it was fantastic. Now, granted, it can look a little bit cartoony in comparison to like what Fallout 3 did, and then like Fallout 3 New Vegas, I think is like that's the high point of the actual series itself, at least in my opinion. But a character that isn't properly voiced, and that's one of your ones. That's a good point.
Generally
actually
speaking,
it's a good point.
There are exceptions to the rule, but more often than not, I just find it grating. And I'll wrap this up now in a sec. But a big one for me is actually Nintendo. They're very guilty of this. So The Legend of Zelda: Link doesn't talk. The last Legend of Zelda game was fully voice acted. The last mainline one, Breath of the Wild, fully voice acted except for Link. Well, not even fully voice acted. It was only in certain cutscenes.
Okay.
But everyone would talk to Link, and he wouldn't say anything. And I'm like, but this isn't a Link that's, again, like a blank slate. He actually has a history in this world, and he's a character. Now, they actually try to give it context, is that he's essentially got like, he's like PTSD or some shit. Oh. And it's like, okay, I get that they're trying, but it's no.
Okay.
But yeah, that's just a personal hang up for me.
Okay. That's an interesting one, though. It is an interesting one.
What's your next one?
The next one that kind of falls back onto the point I made about Resident Evil, and I'm going to say right now that tank controls are the worst game control I've ever played, and I'm going to be lynched for this. I really am. And this is what, like, don't get me wrong. I can understand how it would work in that kind of world, because with Resident Evil, like like every choice that you make has a consequence. Every item that you pick up has like consequences to like the weight that you're carrying or the inventory space. And style wise, I can understand like you have to take your time with doing this, and each footstep that you make could be your last. But the whole tank control thing, man, like, it's just, even when playing the first Resident Evil, and this was only like, I only played the first Resident Evil like a couple of years back. I think the second one was like technically the first one that I played. and I thought the game was broken. And I just didn't understand how, like, you literally have to, like, hold this direction on the D-pad to turn their top of their body this way, and then up and down to aim this way, and it just felt so. Now, granted, I think that's what maybe the developers were trying to do, was trying to make you feel like, I don't know, like the game is kind of maybe fighting against you, like the environment is fighting against you and the enemies are fighting against you. But it's been one of those gaming controls that I despise. I really do. And that's, I probably fall into like the small minuscule option, like percentage of people who be like, no, it's great because it's this and it's this. But for me, it's just like, I can't do it. Like, what do you think of tank controls? Like, you're the resi head here. Like, I've only played a handful because I'm a filthy casual. But like, do you know what I mean? Like, what do you make of tank controls, and why do you think it works so well with resi? Because it doesn't make any sense to me.
I fucking love tank control.
Why? Really? Okay.
I know, it's weird. It's like, it's
why,
one of those
though?
things.
Why?
So
what
that's
makes
the thing.
So that's the thing, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing, right?
That's the thing, right?
That's the thing, right? I totally get why you don't like tank controls, because they are ass. I agree. They are janky ass. But I love them. And it could be, you could argue it's nostalgia. You could argue it's just a personal bias, because Resident Evil is my favorite franchise. Resident Evil 1 Remake is my favorite game.
So
and
sorry to cut across you, though. Wasn't there an option for the remake where you could actually have the classic tank controls or more fluid controls on the controller? Is that something, or am I pipe dreaming this? Or
that's the thing, right? So in the original version of the remake on GameCube, no, that wasn't an option. In the remaster of the remake, it was.
For the PlayStation, I get you. That's the one that I played, because I never had a GameCube.
And
now here's the thing. Can I just sideline this?
Yeah, no, totally.
Did you play the remaster of the remake with tank controls, or did you play it with the classic one direction on the analog stick? Because this is where it gets interesting now. You played it both.
I tried both,
and you can definitely see a shift between the, like, not only the gameplay, but like,
yeah. So the updated controls,
feel of the game, I suppose.
Yeah, the updated controls kind of add an element of, I don't know, like, things feel a bit, because your character's reaction to your choice of movement is immediate. So if I point right, they go right. If I point left, they go left. They don't turn and all that kind of stuff. So that the game feels a bit quicker. So if that's what you're looking for, I think that's great. For me, the tank controls add to the kind of tense atmosphere. It's kind of like in Dark Souls, where you have to commit to every move you're about to do. And you need to know that it is the right move before you make it. And I like that. I think it adds to the atmosphere and the tension of the game. That said, I totally get why you hate them.
It's just, I can't, like, and I remember we had this conversation on the YouTube video that we did about our 6 moments in gaming, and I said, when I think there was actually at one stage that I was screen sharing me playing I'm just going to call it the remake for Resi Evil rather than the remaster of the remake. Yeah. So when I was playing the remake of Resi 1, I was screen sharing it with you, and I was like, listen, I'm playing not with tank controls, I'm playing like the classic controls right now, and I'm finding it to be, this isn't working for me. And that was with classic controls. So with tank controls, it just feels, I don't know, like it doesn't feel like I'm controlling a person. It feels like I'm controlling like a linear sequence of grids and squares that I don't feel like I am in control. Do you know what I mean?
It takes you out of the experience.
It pulls me away completely, because I'm fighting with the actual trying to control the character that I'm playing rather than trying to survive the situation I'm in.
Yeah.
But
that's really interesting.
It was just a point for me. I was like, look, this is something that I've been dying to get off my chest for a long time. But I find it interesting that you actually are a fan of them. What makes you a fan of them, though? Like, is it just?
It's for
the
me,
nostalgia thing.
There's definitely a nostalgic element to it. Like, if a new game came out now with, I suppose a new game did come out, Tormented Souls, and we're actually going to play that together. Well, I'm going to play it, and you're going to watch because you hate tank controls.
Yes.
And I loved it. I was so into it because I'm like,
it looks really good.
Yeah, like the tank controls really for me. I really enjoyed the tank controls.
Okay.
It's largely nostalgic because it harkens back to my kind of introduction to survival horror as a genre, into my introduction to my favorite franchise. So it kind of will always have kind of a soft spot in my heart. But at the same time, I totally understand this mentality of, like, they're not functionally good. They're not they're almost antithetical to game design and game feel as a concept. Is let's make the control as awkward as possible for our player.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound like a good idea when you like on paper. That's like you're just going to piss off your player and they're not going to want to play your game.
Yeah.
Case in point.
Yeah.
So no, totally get you. But I'm a sucker for them.
Oh, that's okay. Okay. What have you got for me? What's up?
Oh, I have my list here and I'm like, oh, which one?
Ooh.
Okay. I'm going to choose a slightly more positive one.
Okay.
I don't think QTEs are that bad.
I had one of those on my list, as a matter of fact, and it was one that
Really?
I deleted. Yeah, it was one that I deleted. Yeah.
See, for me, and like I say, I don't think they're that bad. I don't think they're that bad when they're done well.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, there are obviously entire genres of game built around them now, with like the likes of Until Dawn, Heavy Rain, all the Telltale games. They're
Quantum Dream have made their name about the QTEs and things like this.
And
they're done right. They're done right, though.
Exactly. Like as an example, like Resident Evil 4 was one of the big games to popularize QTEs.
I was just about to say this because in the cutscenes, it's not like one of those games where you can just, okay, there's a cutscene happening, could put the controller down, like crack my fingers a little bit, go for a piss. Yeah. But like something could happen on the screen, like, and you have to like dodge out of the way by pressing X a certain amount of times or whatever.
Yeah. It kind of, at the time anyway, for that game, it was like it kind of kept people engaged in what was going on because they're actively taking part. Now I know it is just a button prompt. But most of video games is button prompts to do things anyway. So, there I said it.
Yeah, they're not that bad.
There are examples of poorly done QuickTime events. Resident Evil 6 being a prime example. The QTEs in that game are egregious. They are overly frequent. They're weirdly awkward. So it's just funny within the same franchise. But then you have other games like God of War, which, you know, they're essentially kind of they were done well because they were like the punctuation to a long battle, and you would use just a quick QTE to finish off an enemy or boss or whatever. Yeah. So there was an element of satisfaction to the way they were implemented there, I think. Now, I will say more often than not, they can be quite egregious. Maybe not more often than not, but enough. Like enough games don't do them well. Or do them awkwardly, or do them too often, or do them without kind of giving them meaning. You know, some games would have very hollow QuickTime events in their games where they're like, oh, QuickTime events are popular, like just slap them in this cutscene, and it's really like,
it came out of nowhere, like.
Yeah, and some of them as well are so, like, Bayonetta has a couple of them where you have a microsecond to react to a QTE. So if you don't know it's coming already, you're not going to get it. And that knocks you back or kills you and you have to start off from a checkpoint or whatever. And it's so fucking irritating because it halts your progress because the game didn't give you fair warning. And I know this is true of Resident Evil 4 as well. A couple of the QTEs in that game are very like, whoa, where did this come from? But less so than other games. So generally speaking, I don't mind them. I think if they're done well, they can enhance the experience. And I think they get undue flack for essentially like it is undue flack because they are, when done right, they're entertaining, they're engaging, they can kind of keep you in the moment when otherwise you might feel a bit like drifting out or maybe not engaged in some way. Just a personal thing. That's all.
I think one of the titles that does that, like that does the whole QTE like really well in the sense of like they're only sprinkled here and there for seasoning, is Telltale season 1 of The Walking Dead. Like if Lee is crawling away from a walker and you have to like mash down a button to get to an axe, and then another window opens up where you have to bring R2 over or whatever it might be to grab the axe. Like it's not just a QTE where like, oh, I know that when this is done, it's done, but like you have to go into another window and open to grab that item to use against a threat. So like if you're frantically like pressing a button, it's like, okay, like my life is on the line here, and it would make such a big difference to like the grander scheme of the story. Like you want to keep these characters alive. But I think when it's just thrown in for the sake of, like, a great example of that is at the end of Resident Evil 5 when Chris punches through a boulder. And it's just like, it's just nonsensical. It's just,
you're just mashing that button. It's like, oh, dude, stop.
You know, it's like
someone's going to fall off.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's now another game that does, I think, the QTEs. to justice would be the Metal Gear series. You know what I mean? And I don't even think you call them QTEs, but in the sense of that button mashing with Metal Gear Solid 1 and the torture sequence, Metal Gear
Yeah,
Solid
true.
2.
And it's like a one-off thing.
Yeah.
There's also with Snake Eater as an example, certain moments in the game where you hold down a button and it changes your perspective of the cutscene you're in.
Yeah.
Which adds new wrinkles to the story, actually enhances other parts of the gameplay. And you could technically argue they're QTEs in a sense because it's in a cutscene, it's not in gameplay. And it is something you have to react to. You have to notice the prompt, and maybe you don't. Sometimes I think, depending on the difficulty, the prompt may not even show up.
Yeah, my biggest issue with QTEs is when like it's the last boss fight of the game, and
many times I've seen that happen. And it's
like if you as you've whittled the boss down to like its last bar of health and knocked them out, then this like cutscene would happen, and it's like square would come up, triangle would come up, R1 comes up, and you have to repeat a sequence of that. It's a bit cheap, you know. It cheapens the impact of the final boss.
It's like you're not really taking part in that sense. Dying Light, I don't know if you played that game too.
I played the first one.
Yeah, the first one ends. The entire final boss fight is a QTE. There's no actual proper fight. Yeah. That annoys me. Because a QTE, that's kind of a punctuation at the end of a long, good battle. That's one thing. But when the entire fight in a game with very good gameplay, that you could do a lot with.
It's the same with Shadow of Mordor as well. The last battle is with Sauron, and it's a
QTE, and you're like,
it's like what? Like your
I'm
minions
not fighting Sauron. Yeah,
it's like your minions and your commanders and lieutenants put up a much more memorable fight than this. Yeah. Like the big bad at the end of the game is just like square, circle, triangle. It's like, oh, for God's sake! It's just, I think at the end of like you can kind of tell when developers or writers or directors are just like, look, I'm getting fucking sick of this title. Just put a QTE in at the end.
Yeah, you just kind of rush it out at the end.
Just rush it out like we still got the money at the end of the day.
Which is a shame because I think Shadow of Mordor has examples of good QTEs. Like if your character gets downed and you have the ability to kind of block an attack in order to get back in the fight, you have to maneuver the button prompt into the correct position.
But that just reminds me of like it's like the Arkham thing though. Like it just they were piggybacking on the Arkham formula.
Yeah, very much so.
Do you know what I mean? What I do think that like Shadow of Mordor, and I think Warner Brothers actually legally have the patent for this, the Nemesis system.
Oh, beautiful. More, please. More games need that.
Absolutely.
Batman game needs that.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the whole Batman title, the Batman narrative nowadays after the unfortunate news.
Okay. So what have you got next?
Right, the next one is it's not as harsh as what what I was kind of talking about at the beginning of the video. Again, these are just like, I think it's important to premise again. These are just our opinions. So I don't like racing games or sports games.
I'm with you there.
I don't like them.
Racing games I kind of occasionally might dabble in, like more kart games than proper like F1 or whatever. But racing and sport games generally, no, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, it's just I don't understand them at all. Like the whole FIFA thing, I know that there's a huge marketplace for them and more power to them. And again, I'm kind
not anymore.
No, well, yeah, geez. Like I'm kind of contradicting myself in this because I'm a big fan of like the WWE franchise.
Oh, cool!
But I actually
didn't know that.
I've been a fan of that kind of franchise since I was like 8 years old. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but
yeah, it's interesting because it's the same kind of principle, really, isn't it?
It is. It's still sports entertainment.
Yeah.
Like,
it's still like, here's a video game version of this thing you enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, but at the same time, I get it.
Yeah, I just don't think like with any of the Gran Turismo or Formula One games that they're really adding that much to the. They're not really evolving that much. They might have new types of models and new engines and different kind of customization options you can do with your car, but like that's it. It's just race around a track.
They're also there's kind of a high barrier for kind of like you can buy the newest Forza game or the newest Gran Turismo, as you said. But there's also, if you want to play those games kind of at a competitive level, the hardware you need to buy is kind of crazy,
man.
And it's like, just buy a car.
It literally, like, it'd be cheaper.
Now, yeah, I get as well. It's safer.
Yeah.
And you could retry when you fail and everything like that. And I get that. Not criticizing that at all. But no, I'm totally picking up what you're putting down there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's just, to me, it just seems like it's like one game. If you bought like let's say, I know like the whole FIFA thing is up in arms at the moment, but like the FIFA series, if you bought the title in 2012 and bought the same one in 2016, there's not that much in the difference between those 4 years. Like there might be like different players or different managers or teams, but like I just don't know, racing games and sports games, man, they're not my jam at all. Like they're really not my jam.
No, I'm totally with you there.
Yeah, I just that was just one that I thought I'd kind of throw out there as well. But I suppose for yourself,
that was brief.
yeah, there's nothing really more I can talk about, to be honest with you, because I can't sit down and just like drive around a track for X amount of time. It's just it doesn't appeal to me. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not getting enough immersion in the game itself. Like at least
totally get you.
With something like with what WWE do, like you can like create your own title belts, you can create your own arena, you can do the story modes where you can create your own character and send them off on their journeys and be drafted to different like either Raw or SmackDown or whatever it might be, and like you can interact with all these other wrestlers there and start up like rivalries and things like this. And now granted the storylines are pretty shit, like I'm not going to lie to you, like it's not like some like magnificent levels of writing or anything like that, but still, like I find
not a big RPG, like
no, it's not like that. It's like you get in the ring, you beat the crap out of your opponent, you pin him, and then you just progress on. But I like it in the sense of I'm the one in control doing this. Whereas in a racing game, it's like it doesn't. There's not that much level of commitment to what I'm doing, because all I'm doing is just holding down one button and turning the analog stick this way or this way, and I might go through a checkpoint here and there. But for racing games and sports games, like I don't know, like I haven't. No, I know I'm using football as an example, but like I haven't played any of the NBA games or NFL or any of like the Tiger Woods games or anything like that, because they just don't see. I don't know, like they just don't seem like fully investable games to play. Do you know what I mean? And this was a point I was going to make later on, and I will come back to it. But when the whole loot box thing happened, that completely just tarnished their reputation of being of sports games, to be honest with you, because you have to open packs that you're spending real-time money on in order to get a player. Whereas in another sports game, like a wrestling game, you just literally beat them in the story and you've unlocked them, like in all fighting games and things like this, you see.
Yeah, I get you.
But I think that's just gambling on steroids, to be honest. But it's like it's more welcoming, because you might get the player you want, you might get the attributes that you want to assign to that player, but you have to pay an extra amount of money to get it. It just, there's something so morally bankrupt about that, I think.
Yeah. No, I totally get you. I absolutely with you on that one.
Yeah. But with racing games and sports games, man, I don't know, they just never really they never really struck a chord with me, to be honest with you.
Totally reasonable.
Short but sweet, but I thought I'd add that to my list.
Yeah. So what's this? My third point now? Third point?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm definitely going to stoke the flames with this one.
Oh.
I think Tomb Raider is better than Uncharted.
Okay, that's interesting.
Again, there's an element of nostalgia here. I grew up with Tomb Raider. Yeah. I didn't get a PS3 when it came out, so I didn't play the Uncharted games until a good while after the fact. But I had played all of the Tomb Raider games up to that point.
That's fair.
I played Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness on the PS2 with my dad as a kid. God, that game sucks.
That sucks, man. That game sucks so bad.
It's awful, but I loved it when it came out.
The first one scared the piss out of me.
Yeah.
That opening scene when you're climbing up the mountain and the shepherd dude is with you, and then the temple door opens and the wolves leg it out. Oh, it scared
But see, that's where like. Yeah, exactly. I love the PS1 games. I love the kind of weird transitional games on like the Xbox 360, where it went, they did the remake Tomb Raider Anniversary. So that was remake of the first game. Then made a direct sequel to that. Tomb Raider Legend came out. Then they made the remake of Tomb Raider 1, which was Tomb Raider Anniversary. And then they made Tomb Raider Underworld, which kind of was a sequel to both.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah, and I enjoy that trilogy. I think Lara Croft is a better character than Nathan Drake.
Okay.
And I love Nathan Drake, and I enjoy the Uncharted games, I do. But there's just something more substantial to me in Tomb Raider than there is in Uncharted. Uncharted are blockbuster games. They
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
they are the Marvel films of video games.
That's very true. That's very, very true.
And not knocking Marvel. I go to see every MCU film when it comes out.
I despise Marvel, so
Fair. But that's it. Like I go to see them all when they come out, and I'm like, cool, that was a good popcorn flick. Then something like the Batman comes out, and I'm like, that's a movie. Like, and this sounds so fucking pretentious of me and sounds so poncy. But
no.
If I could get one more movie like the Batman over anything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
absolutely agree. Absolutely,
100%. And that's as a fan. That is as someone who enjoys those films. Same with Uncharted.
I think one category is shut your brain off, and then the other category is you're properly invested. Yeah.
Which is ironic because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is so bogged down with all of the continuity and shit. But this is a video game channel, not a movie channel. We'll set that up later.
We will talk about that. Yeah, of course.
So that's the thing. Is for me, it feels like Tomb Raider is just a bit more substantial than Uncharted. Like,
Can I ask you a question though about that?
Of course.
So just about when you said that you found that Lara Croft was a much more substantial and in some ways relatable character, are you talking about the generation of Lara Croft that we grew up with, or are you also bringing in the new generation of Lara Croft when the whole thing was kind of rewritten and
the reboot?
Exactly. Yeah. So
a bit of everything now. There's elements of each version of Lara that I like or dislike. The original version of Lara in the PS1 games, she was very much just, I'm the badass heroine. And she was a huge step forward for female protagonists in video games at the time, which was great. But then they kind of used her as an awkward sex symbol to sell stuff, and that was weird at the time.
Yeah.
Then the first reboot era, which was like PS2, Xbox 360, that's my definitive Lara Croft. It's my favorite voice actor. Who played the role. I can't remember her name. But she has kind of an actual arc across the 3 games, which I love.
Wasn't Tara Strong, was it?
No, it wasn't Tara Strong. She's in Tomb Raider Legend, though.
Okay.
No,
but the other one that I'm talking about is like with the ones that came out for the PS3.
So that's Camilla Luddington of Grey's Anatomy fame.
Oh yeah.
She voices and mocaps for Lara in those games.
Oh cool. I haven't played those games actually, but they look really, really good.
The first one came out 2013. I remember I bought that shit day one.
Keely Hawes. She's
my definitive Lara Croft.
That's in that. Yeah, that's in Lara. That's in Legends, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So in that reboot era, that's 3 of my favorite games. I just adore them. They're so much fun and engaging. They're so engaging to play. And in the recent reboot series, I do like that they went for a more grounded approach. I think they could have explored Lara's first adventure a bit more in that game, where she kills for the first time and she has a reaction to it. And it's like, oh god, this is actually kind of serious. But then she kind of brushes it off and it's like, I will kill you all. It's like, it's badass. And it is Lara Croft. You expect Lara Croft to be a badass. But I don't know. Generally speaking, I just maybe Nathan Drake ebbs her out slightly more in the reboot era. But before that, I just think Lara Croft, she's more badass. She's more cool. She's more in the Legends trilogy. I think she's just really well written and well acted. And I'm not knocking Nathan Drake. Nolan North is Nathan Drake.
Oh, he's magnificent.
But at least for me anyway, in Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, it's very much just action movie hero.
The goofy, aloof kind of action movie hero.
And it's done really fucking well. It is. It's like I'm playing as John McClane or Indiana Jones or any of that kind of stuff. And I do enjoy that.
Yeah.
I just prefer Tomb Raider and Lara Croft to Uncharted and Nathan Drake.
Fair.
Particularly like Uncharted 4 tried some new ideas for the franchise, but I'm fucking sorry. There's no way he had a brother before that game. I know.
Yeah, that was shoehorned in, so it was
very badly written.
You're right. Like I would have like going on that point there. Like I've played Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, and at no point in those games is Sam ever mentioned.
No, and like I get that it was kind of a kind of retroactive continuity thing to the story. They retconned it slightly because they wanted to tell the story, and that happens. That does happen where they come up with an idea later in the franchise, but it's something that unfortunately has an impact on the continuity of that franchise. I get that does happen, but it could have been done so much better.
Yeah, like there could have been a point like in Uncharted 2 or something, like the opening of that game when Nathan is in his study or something like that, and he finds a letter from Sam. and Sully is over his shoulder. He's like, "Oh, who's Sam?" He's like, "Oh, it's my brother, but he died so many years beforehand," and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And,
or even if you don't have a reference in those games, reference his existence in the new game with the other characters. Like Elena never knew about Nathan Drake's brother before.
Sam knows about, or Sully knows about
Sully
him.
knows, yeah, because he knew Sam. But apparently Nate never told Elena, and it's like they were married twice.
Yeah.
Why the hell has he never mentioned his brother? I'm sorry, it's just poor writing.
It is poor writing. It is, but that, I think they just wanted to get Nolan North and what's that other
Troy Baker,
and Troy Baker in the one title, just to kind of like say this is the last swan song. Yeah,
because they had Nolan North was actually in The Last of Us.
Yeah, he was Larry, wasn't he? Yeah, or David, I think his name was
Larry David, the cannibal. But that's my probably one of my more controversial. Or out there opinions.
I've got one there for you, and this is another one of my points, and it kind of falls under the lines of the whole controversial thing, and I'm going to say it right now. From Software games are not difficult.
Oh.
They're not difficult. They're not difficult. So here's the thing about From Software games, right? So I played Dark Souls. You got me into Dark Souls, right? And I remember playing those games and just being like, what the fuck is actually going on here? Because not only is like the story or lack of exposed story ever kind of shown to the player, like you kind of have to piece things together.
Yeah.
There's been such a culture built around From Software in the sense of, like I saw one thing actually. You remember when the Crash Bandicoot thing came out? The Insane trilogy was released.
Dark Souls of platformers.
Yeah, exactly, the Dark Souls of platformers. And I was like, Dark Souls isn't difficult. The thing that's making it difficult is
good.
No, but here's the thing. Like, it's like how I'm trying to describe it is the games are challenging.
Yeah,
they are challenging, but they're not difficult. Like, you just have to pay very, very close attention to your enemies' movements, their patterns. You have to pay attention to the environment around you. You have to invest a lot of time in what you're doing. But when you overcome that first main boss, it's like, I did that.
Yeah.
The game didn't do that. I did that. And yet you're going to die multiple times because the game will just mop the floor with you if you don't think about what you're doing properly. But they're not difficult. They're not difficult. What I mean by that is, like, there's no insane difficulty spike. Now, granted, I know that there's a part in Elden Ring when the difficulty spike goes through the roof.
And Bloodborne, when the Blood Moon rises.
But the thing is, though, when the Blood Moon rises after you've been to Yahar'gul, it's still manageable. Like, the only thing that makes it look like that it is extremely difficult is because when you see the Amygdala monsters dangling from the buildings. But, like, aside from that,
also, blood vials cost twice as much after that point in the game.
But it doesn't make the game difficult, though. It just means that that you've been resourcing your items the wrong way.
This is interesting because there's a guy I watch. I think I sent a video of his before, but I don't know if you watched it. Noah Caldwell Gervais.
No,
he has a 5.5 hour retrospective on the Dark Souls trilogy.
Okay,
and he makes the point that. He discusses the fact that, there's an open call for people to be like, people have been saying, oh, Dark Souls needs
an easy mode. Yeah.
Noah argues the games already have that built into the systems by the means of progression. Mm-hmm. You can grind up souls and spec out your character with enhanced health, enhanced defense, enhanced stats in any way, and that is essentially a sliding difficulty curve. Built into the mechanics of the game itself, because it allows any player, like, if you're like, I really enjoying this game, but I'm finding it kind of a struggle, grind some souls up, level up a bit, then you're kind of ahead of the curve. You have a bit more defense, a bit more, maybe weirdly enough in Dark Souls 2, more invincibility frames for your role. But it's an interesting kind of concept. He's kind of like, look, these games have it built into them. The only one that arguably is out and out difficult is Sekiro, because it doesn't have a leveling up system in the same way, and is very much timing based.
That's it. Like, about Sekiro, it's much more rhythm based.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you have to can be more difficult.
Yeah, if people don't we all have natural rhythm inside us. I'm a champion of this. We all have natural rhythm, but when you see a flash happening on the screen and then that's when the enemy attacks just a second afterwards, and it's like, oh, I missed it, and then you're taken down completely because of it. Then I can understand how it would get frustrating. But at the base of it all, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro to an extent, they're not difficult. The thing that's making it difficult is your approach to the game itself. But you have to play the game and die a shitload of times before you say, no, hang on. The game is going to stay the same. It's what I'm doing, which is the problem here.
Yeah.
So do you know what I mean?
You have options. Yeah.
Of course you have options.
Like you can, okay, I'm going to spec my character out as a tank and wear like heavier armor and maybe have like increased poise so I don't have to stagger when I get hit. And that's what this guy Noah Caldwell-Gervais did. He got like Havel's ring and all of Havel's gear. And he's like, because he says, I'm not a reactionary player. I'm not fast at games. But the games gave him the means by which he could tweak the difficulty to his skill level.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great because even then, it wasn't necessarily that he's changing his approach. He's using the tools the game gave him to make the game more accessible, which I think is fantastic. And I'd never heard of that kind of argument in favor of the game's quote-unquote difficulty before.
Yeah,
I'd highly recommend you watch it. Anyone listening, if you haven't watched Noah Caldwell-Gervais, he is the king of long-form video game analysis. His 7.5-hour video on the Resident Evil games is art. But that's a great concept because it is like, no, the games give you all the tools you need to beat them. How are you going to use them?
Exactly.
And I totally get what you mean. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's like I see so many people like on YouTube videos just saying, "Oh, you just have to get good," and it's like, no, that's a meme created around a video game.
That's nonsense.
That whole thing is just a load of trash, to be honest with you. But like, I know that there's like let's players and speedrunners who have made like careers out of like speedrunning these games, and it's like, you cannot tell me that Dark Souls is difficult when you're wearing a loincloth and have completed the game in 20 minutes. You can't tell me it's difficult. Don't tell me it's difficult, because it's not. It's manageable. What's making it difficult is because you're getting frustrated with the game, and that's where the game is beating you.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. Generally, video games, we're kind of conditioned to have to keep doing the same thing over and over and over until we get through it. You know, a number of games don't give you the options that FromSoft games do to tackle any challenge. Like, I will say there's the very rare occasion where certain builds are at an advantage in FromSoft games. You know, sometimes like a magic build might break the game in half. Yeah. Or sometimes it's, you know, enemies are maybe slightly faster and you need to be more tanky. But generally speaking, yeah, I agree. It's, you have the tools. How are you going to use them? And you can respec your character a lot of in those games. You know, you have the option to approach things in different ways. And if you're not feeling, I'll switch up my weapon, or I'll switch up my gear, or I'll switch up my like spells, or whatever. There's always a new way to approach any problem you come up against.
Absolutely, yeah. And From Software are one of those companies that really know how to do that properly. They're not going to hold your hand. It's like Hollow Knight. They're not going to hold your hand.
Yeah,
you know, they're literally throwing you in. Go ahead. We're giving you the tools. Now you decide how you want to use them.
That's our obligatory Hollow Knight reference. Thank you.
One every video.
Yeah. Gotta have one.
Oh, yes. So I think this is your fifth one, is it? Or is this your fifth one?
Fourth.
Your fourth one. Okay, brilliant.
Yeah, well, no, we got lots of time left.
Awesome.
We're in no hurry.
Love it.
So here's an odd one. And I don't know if this will piss people off so much as make them go like, really? Like, why? And I don't even understand it quite myself, but
okay.
BioShock Infinite is my favorite BioShock.
Now that's an interesting one, right? Because
go on.
BioShock Infinite was the first one I played.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I never had it on the Xbox 360, and for the longest time, I couldn't find it anywhere. I actually found it years afterwards, after I played Infinite. I think it was re-released for the PS3.
Yeah.
Along with BioShock 2. So that was when I played it. So when I first played Infinite, I didn't understand the amount of hate that the game was getting, because granted, it's such a massive difference between the first one. You know, it's a bigger, more sprawling title. You could argue.
Definitely.
But yeah, that's an interesting one. And
it's like, it's one of those things where I love the original Bioshock, and I like Bioshock 2 as well. I think Bioshock 2 is slightly derivative of the first, but I think it does enough on its own to kind of be a good, interesting game with a good story. But for me, I don't know. I played Bioshock 1 after the hype. So I was like, okay, yeah, cool. It's as good as everyone said it was. But I got Bioshock Infinite at launch. So that was my first Bioshocky experience. So I guess for me, it's an element of kind of it's special. And
yeah,
like
granted, I can understand why you'd say Infinite is your favorite one, because there's so much that it adds to the plate, and there's so much that is it's so much different to the underwater metropolis of Columbia, or of not Columbia, of Rapture.
Rapture, yeah.
So like there's two huge, different locations already.
Exactly.
But what I do really like is, like, I suppose what I'm trying to say is about Colombia, like, it just seems like a much more vibrantly sprawled kind of city. So in your opinion, like, I can understand why you'd like Bioshock Infinite more, but like, why? Because Bioshock 1 is like, it's timeless. It's such a classic, that would you kindly thing, the whole reveal in Rapture, it's just incredible. So why Infinite?
I don't like silent protagonists.
Is that the reason why?
No, it's again, like, that's the kind of thing where.
But Jack isn't really silent though either. Jack is still, he's vocal at points, like the beginning and the ending. He's much more vocal.
Yeah, but he doesn't have any kind of real direct dialogue in the game.
But is that the reason why?
No, it's a factor. It's one thing I prefer about Bioshock Infinite is that it is fully voice acted. And I love Rapture. I love the kind of the sense of foreboding you get when you're kind of exploring it, and it's more like a horror title in a lot of ways, which is great.
Survival horror, yeah.
Yeah, and I adore Bioshock, like, I really do. And again, it could be an element of nostalgia, is that when I played Bioshock Infinite, I was experiencing all of it for the first time, which I didn't get with Bioshock 1.
Yeah, okay.
I love Colombia as a city. I think it's really engaging and fun, and the fact that you're kind of in it at the turning point, I suppose. You're seeing it as it's happening, instead of after the fact, which is something I do love in video games as well. You show up and everything's kind of happened already, and you're like, ooh.
Yeah.
But I love Booker's character. I love Elizabeth's character. I love the arc Booker goes on. I don't care for the DLC that much. Burial at Sea just didn't really do it for me.
Yeah, it was a bit hit and miss. It was a bit disappointing as well.
It was like, let's revisit the first game.
Yeah.
But like, I think Elizabeth as a character is fantastic. And this was around that time when I suppose, like, when it was kind of like the daddy figures of video games started to emerge, like
Joel and Ellie. Yeah.
Joel, Ellie, Booker and Elizabeth, Lee and Clementine.
Yeah.
That was kind of that weird era.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, for me, it was just, it just struck a chord, I suppose. And there's another element of it as well. I am a sucker. I'm a goddamn sucker for multiverse stuff.
Okay.
It's one of those things, multiverse and time travel. I don't even care if it's done well. I'm into the concept so much that it kind of will grip me already. Now, I don't think it was particularly well implemented in Bioshock Infinite. I think there's definitely some issues with, like, the story continuity and how they tried to retcon Bioshock 1 story elements to fit Bioshock Infinite. But I don't know, I suppose just if I was to pick up one of them and play them just again, like if I was like, oh, I'm going to play through one of them this weekend, it would probably just be Bioshock Infinite.
I'd agree with you.
Yeah, like the gameplay is definitely like more frenetic and exciting. I think the pace at which the story itself moves is better than Bioshock. Bioshock 1, most of the actual story doesn't happen till the second half of the game.
I'd agree with you, yeah.
Whereas
with Bioshock 1, it felt very video gamey. Like, you have to go here to get this key, to go down here, to go over here, to open that door, which leads you here, but you can't get there because you need that plasma, but you don't have that plasma, so you have to go all the way back here and get this to kill that guy to get it.
Yeah,
it feels very kind of video gamey, but
and that actually, it's before I finish this point, I'm not going to tell you another reason I prefer it, but it feeds into my next point.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave it there, and then
Can
I'll
I
ask you where you're...
if I could just make a point on BioShock Infinite.
Oh, yeah.
I know we've talked about the whole "would you kindly" thing, which we've talked about it, I think, 2 or 3 times on the actual YouTube channel, the Save Point YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But my overall favorite moment in the entire BioShock story is when you're Booker and you're shooting up in the elevator.
Oh, at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, from the lighthouse, and you're shooting up through the clouds, and you hear 10,000 feet, 30,000 feet, ascending,
Yeah.
and hallelujah, and you see Columbia in all its grandeur. But
And
there's
then will the circle be unbroken?
It's when you go into that underground church, man, and you see the water just gently cascading down, and
gorgeous.
You see these followers coming through these doorways, praying and just like gently walking through the water. It's like, this is heaven. Like, the guy who has made Columbia has made this place. He's actually made heaven. It felt so. I didn't want to leave that place. Like, it felt so. You can find voxophones about the place, which give you a little bit more information about Lady Comstock and all this kind of thing. But it was just that serene, blissful moment of like, I actually don't want to continue playing the game because I know it's probably not going to get this serene if we're going on BioShock standards.
Yeah.
But it was
going to go wrong.
yeah, and it does go very, very wrong for Booker rather quickly in Infinite. But that's a really good choice, man. No, I'd actually agree with you on that and say no. I'd say Infinite is my favorite of the 3. Yeah. Of the 3, I think the second one is the weakest. But I think
that's generally the case, though. I think a lot of people are in agreement that the second one, while good, I don't think there's not a bad game among them. But because the second one, like the second one is kind of like being a big daddy and everything's interesting and all, but it is kind of like, oh, I've been in Rapture, I've seen Rapture, show me something new, and it shows new aspects to Rapture, and does actually expand on the continuity and the lore, which is good. But BioShock Infinite just was like, I don't know, it just went in an interesting new direction for me.
Yeah,
and I just
that's a good choice. Really good choice. Really, really good choice.
Hit me with number 5.
I don't find that controversial at all, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But I'm going to get very controversial right now.
Oh, sexy.
So I think this is my 5th one. I'm almost certain this is my 5th one.
So we have 2 left each.
Right. I'm going to hit it right now, okay? And I'm going to say this, and this falls, I'm going to sweep this across the board, okay? And my 5th point, and I mean this with the greatest of respects, but in my opinion, a dedicated fan base is a toxic cesspool.
Oh.
And what I mean by that is, right, I mean, it almost feels like you're not allowed to be a fan of a certain franchise anymore.
Yeah.
And a good example of that is, and this happened to me, like, true story, this happened to me only a few months ago.
Oh.
So, as I said at the start of this podcast, Persona 5 Royal is my favorite game of pretty much all time.
Yeah.
And Sega and Atlas do their giant showcase in October. You know, they let people know what's going on in what they have coming up, the Shin Megami Tensei series, all this kind of thing. And me being stupid, I commented on their Instagram story and said, "Oh, it'd be fantastic to hear any news of Persona 6." And I swear to God, there was comment after comment after comment underneath of, "You're just a fanboy for Persona 5. You're just a fanboy for this. They did other titles, you know." And I'm looking at my phone like, guys, I'm just asking if there's any news on something else coming up. Like, I'm surely I'm allowed to ask this. Like,
yeah, I mean, Persona 5 was in 2017, you know?
Yeah, and like afterwards I was like, what did I do wrong here? But even like going with what's going on with this Final Fantasy 7 remake, the forums are ablaze with people being like, "They didn't remake my version of Final Fantasy 7 and all this." It's like, guys, like, just calm down. Like, it's just a fucking game. Let people enjoy it. Like, it's wink, wink. It's almost like you're being punished for being a fan of a series. Like, if you have something that you really like about it, all of a sudden you've got legions of people jumping on you saying, "No, you're not allowed to be a fan of this," or "You're not allowed to like this because I said so."
Or like, you're being a fan wrong. Like, that's one of the worst things for me. It's one of those like, Final Fantasy as a franchise is such a bizarre one anyway, because each game is so drastically different to the last that it's like you're not a fan of the Final Fantasy franchise. You're a fan of a specific game.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say I am guilty of that. I will hold my hand up there and say I'm guilty of that, because kind of like off topic here, but like my favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy X.
Yeah.
And because that was such an integral part of me when I was growing up, like this was the one title that said it's okay to be an outsider. It's okay to like certain things. It's okay. It's all right to be like this. And then when the second game was released, a direct sequel, the first time it was a direct sequel was ever released for a Final Fantasy game, I completely blacklisted it and said no. And anybody who is a fan of that game is wrong. So I had a lot of learning to do, you know. But then when I went back to, I was young and stupid, but like when I went back to play it again, I was like, no, I can see why people would like this, because it's fun, it's energetic. There's you're playing as Yuna, which is like one of the greatest female video game characters of all time. She's on this new story. It's great. It's fantastic for her. But for me, it was like it kind of went against the grain of what was established in my personal game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
I get you.
It just feels like there's such a toxic cesspool. Like I would have loved like one person to say, no, he's right. Like, do we have any news about Persona 6? Like, we'd love to keep this story going. But it was like,
it's a genuine question. Even and much like Persona, much like Final Fantasy, each game is very much its own continuity with its own characters. It's been kind of touched on before, I believe. People believe that all the Persona games take place in the same universe, but just explore different characters and different themes, and that's fine. So like a Persona 6 could be drastically different to Persona 5, but I doubt it. They have their formula, they've nailed it, but new characters, new setting, new themes and stuff like that.
It just felt like I was wrong for liking a game.
Yeah, how dare you? How dare you enjoy something?
It was like,
my
God,
want more.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like, guys, calm down, will you? Like, seriously, calm down. There's this kind of toxic kind of fan bases going on. I'm probably sure you saw it in the Resi franchise and things like this. Like,
Resi's a weird one because
the movies and such, and the CGI movies. And
you're kind of like each version of Resident Evil has its own fans. You have the classic fans that are 0, 1, 2, 3 in Code Veronica. You have the 4, 5, and 6 fans, the kind of action genre ones. Then you have the modern fans who are into like the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake and Resident Evil 7 and 8. And it's like they're just, a lot of them are just kind of segregated into, no, that's not my Resident Evil. And it's like Resident Evil has changed so many times over the years. There's no one thing that is Resident Evil. So get over it.
Yeah.
Now, there's one thing that really, like, in terms of fan bases, I feel like two of the worst are
Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts.
No, actually, not my experience.
Oh, okay.
Two of the worst that I have seen would be Sonic the Hedgehog fans.
What? Really?
Sonic the Hedgehog is because again, the problem is Sega.
No, I'm going to be feigning ignorance here because I've only played like. Okay, again, I can hear people sharpening their pitchforks now.
Mm-hmm.
Green Hill Zone 1, that was from the Sega console game, right?
Yeah, the original version.
That's the only one I've played.
Fair.
And that to me is Sonic. But
yeah, I'm a casual enjoyer of Sonic myself. I love the classic games. I played them back on my cousin's Sega Mega Drive. It's called Sega Mega Drive in Ireland. It's the Sega Genesis elsewhere.
We're going to call it the Mega Drive because
Mega Drive. Right. That's hardcore, man. So I played the classics back then. I've bought them again on modern consoles since. I played them on my Switch because they're 2D and Switch is better for 2D games, in my opinion. So then on the GameCube, I got Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, which was my first 3D Sonic. Okay. And I adored it. It's camp as balls.
Is that an RPG or is it?
No. It's very much a platformer. It's a third-person platforming game in 3D on the GameCube. It was originally a Dreamcast game that was ported over, I think. Okay. And it's just so cheesy. The first level of the game, you're playing as Sonic and he jumps out of a helicopter and he takes like a piece off the helicopter, and as he lands, the music starts playing and it's like rolling around at the speed of sound, and it's real like cheesy, over the top, and the music is fucking, the music slaps, as the young people say. And I'm just so into it. I fucking love it. Like, I'm so like, I'm here for this. And that for me, that's my like definitive Sonic the Hedgehog era. the adventure era as it's known. Now Sonic will go through other iterations as the years have gone on, and it's since kind of 2006, the fabled Sonic 06. There's been that was the game that kind of fractured the fan base. From what I can see, because it is awful. It is one of the most horrendously made games, and that's the thing. It's low hanging fruit at this stage. Everyone knows what a disaster that game was, so it's not fun to talk about it anymore.
But at the time, it was like, this is like a big problem.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, what the fuck? Because it was like the 15th anniversary of Sonic. It was the first time on the Xbox generation of consoles. It was like, this is the next stage, and it was called Sonic the Hedgehog. So it's like, this is like a bold reimagining, and it was a disaster. And it feels as though Sega just rushed shit out like every couple of years, and not even all that often. Sonic isn't it's not like Pokemon or Assassin's Creed or COD where it's an annual franchise now. It's like there are still like gaps in development years, so you have to wonder, why do the games keep coming out broken? Now that's where the divide is. People like me who don't care about Sonic anymore. There are people that love Sonic but don't like modern Sonic, and then there are people that are like, oh, you're just butthurt fanboys. You just don't like Sonic because it's not the Sonic you grew up with. And it's like, no, like the complaints are legitimate. You know, there's bad game design choices. There's rushed game development. There's issues with these games. You're allowed to like them. Nobody's saying, well, no, there are people saying you're not allowed to like them, toxic fandoms and all that. But the sensible, non-stupid people are like, no, you're okay to like your games, but we're okay to not like them. That's my beef here. If I complain about a modern Sonic game online, and I don't because I know the danger.
It's that bad,
I'm attacked by these like fucking diehard fans. They're like, oh, you just hate Sonic because it's not the Sonic you grew up with. You're just an adventure fanboy era. Adventure era fanboy, even. English, do you speak it? And it's like, no, I just, like, there are problems with the adventure games as well. They were made like ass. Like, Sonic Adventure 1 is one of the ugliest fucking games I've ever played. Now, it's charming and nostalgic for me, so I enjoy it in that respect.
What's the other franchise like that's like super toxic then?
Pokemon.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
It's Pokemon. Like Pokemon, really? again, there's elements of like...
And granted though, aren't these like, they don't even come across as like serious fucking games. Like they're for kids essentially.
Yeah, and
adults can play them.
Yeah, exactly. Kids games can be enjoyed by anyone. I enjoy Pokemon. I play Pokemon to this day. The new games come out, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I'm probably going to pick it up at some stage because I like Pokemon. End of. But the problem with Pokemon is that so Pokemon, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, is the highest grossing franchise in the world.
Really?
Yeah, it is the biggest franchise on the planet, more so than any other. Now, not just the games. This is media, like the anime, this is the card game, merchandise, all that stuff. So collectively, the franchise of Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise in the world.
Right.
And yet, year on year, the games are becoming more stripped back, more janky, more rushed out in order to meet deadlines.
Right.
The newest game in particular has been described as the cyberpunk of Pokemon.
Dave is playing that at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, I feel bad for him. Now Dave is enjoying it, and if he's enjoying it, who fucking cares?
Yeah,
that's all. If he's having a good time and the game is functioning for him,
but when you say it's been described as like the cyberpunk of the Pokemon games, does that mean like that the gameplay is just broken, or there's like
I've seen clips online where one character went to get on, like, there's a Pokemon you can kind of ride around on. He went to get on it, and his character model elongated by about 50 feet, so he was just completely stretched out and horrifying Slenderman monster.
Jesus.
Like characters in Pokemon disappearing into the environment, not loading in. Generally speaking, the game just looks kind of like ass, like the textures in the environment. And then you look at games that released on the same console that look 10 times better. And I mean, not just like the new Pokemon game is the first time the series has done a proper open world. That's gonna, that takes more resources, that takes more processing power. But there's a game, Xenoblade Chronicles. The remake of the first Xenoblade Chronicles came out on the Switch. Oh, maybe a remaster? It might be a remaster. But that looks better. And it came out like 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
And is made by a smaller team with less money.
But looks better.
It looks significantly better, runs significantly better. And it's like, I'm sorry, that is just unacceptable for the biggest branch. And the worst part is since the first Switch game, Pokemon Let's Go, Then
Oh yeah.
then there was Pokemon Sword and Shield. Then there was Pokemon Legends Arceus, and now Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Pokemon Arceus came out earlier this year, so within less than a year, we've had 2 Pokemon games.
Yeah.
Pokemon Sword and Shield came out, I think, 2 years ago. So Pokemon is now an annual franchise. It has been for quite some time because they'll do a game, then they'll do a remake, then they do a game, then they do a remake. So they keep doing that shit.
Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty.
Essentially, it's like
you're losing it.
And they're JRPGs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they're not let's kill God with the power of friendship, Persona kind of stuff. They're very much like, oh, I'm going to go out and adventure with my little animal buddies, and they're superficially JRPGs in that they have like stat management, team management, and general RPG mechanics. Turn based and all that kind of stuff. And I enjoy that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the fandom is so again
it's toxic.
Like my favorite Pokemon game is Pokemon Soul Silver, which is a remake of Pokemon Silver, because the game is fully featured, has the perfect amount of Pokemon for me, has more content than almost any other game in the franchise, while still being well balanced and being well made and like all that stuff. And I'm kind of like, I prefer that game. Oh, you're just a butthurt Pokemon fan, but you don't like modern Pokemon, blah, 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 blah. I enjoyed Pokemon Sword. I played it. It's very shallow. And the games have gotten easier with time. There's less of an effort to challenge their players, but Pokemon fans are Pokemon fans, and they'll just be, no, you just don't get it. You're not a real fan, or you're just butthurt that it's not the one you like.
It's just like, let me enjoy the fucking game, will you?
Yeah. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy the new game. I'm saying I don't, which I'm allowed not to do. Like, God forbid people have a different opinion than you.
God forbid people have fun.
Yeah, and that's obviously a big part of what this this podcast is about, is that we do have different opinions, but we're not saying that people are wrong. We're simply saying you're allowed to have different opinions. We're not, and I know we're not pioneers of that concept. Other people have said so online before, but it's still astounding to me that we live in an era where it is so easy to connect with other people, and yet they don't want you to.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it is astonishing to me. Like, I'm sorry, I've kind of hijacked your point a little bit.
No, of course not. Of course not. Go ahead. It's what this is for.
You triggered something primal in me with that point.
I'm sorry.
That I didn't know was there. Yeah, no, I agree, man. Like, and obviously that extends beyond video games as well. Like things like Star Wars and Rick and Morty and all these other things have horrible fan bases. And it makes you ashamed. It makes you ashamed to consider yourself a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're like, I don't think I'm a dickhead. I'm like a guy who likes this thing, and I want to share that enjoyment.
Literally, all I was asking was like on, like the developers' own social media. Oh, is there any news about a possible trailer or any news about Persona 6? 30 seconds later, you're just a fanboy for Persona 5. You don't understand what everything else. Have you ever played Shin Megami Tensei, bro? And I'm like, dude, calm down, will you? Like, of course I have. But it's like, of course I have. But like, it's like, this is the one that I'm like, I want to know about.
Like they're different.
My God, like,
I've actually seen that before with Shin Megami Tensei and Persona. Is a lot of people are like, oh man, Persona's just kind of like a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei. I was like, that is true. But Very it's still true. Its own, it's its own thing. It has its own merits, separate from the Shin Megami Tensei series. You know, they're not like, they have the same foundation, but they've built something different.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus, man, people are weird. People are just weird. So that was I think that was my fifth point. I've got one last point, but I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, my friend. Thank you. I think this is your
number five.
Number five. Okay.
This actually feeds into the BioShock thing from before.
Oh.
And I don't know if it's quite a hot take, but given the kind of the current landscape of video games and everything like that, I think it's just it's no harm in saying it.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer shorter linear games
than open world
games. Yeah,
I knew you'd say that.
And it's not that I don't enjoy open world games. As I said, I'm replaying Skyrim, but I get more value out of if it's for narrative purposes and stuff like that, especially, and that's like where BioShock Infinite kind of hooked me more than BioShock 1 did. BioShock 1, you're often kind of in these fairly open areas, which is great. They're little bubbles. But Infinite, while it is a bit more handholdy at times and a bit more linear, I think that kept the pace of the narrative up for me. Like, I recently completed God of War Ragnarok, and that game is described as wide linear by the developers. So you're in kind of, here's the next section of the story, and you have some areas you can explore, or you can just go ahead. That stuff I like as well. But, like, it's funny as well. Resident Evil 1 Remake is my favorite game ever, and that's not linear at all. So kind of trumps some of the points I'm making here. And I'm fully aware of that.
Sorry, just going on that point, though. So Resident Evil 1 Remake is not a linear game?
Not really. Like, you have to manage linear. It has its moments of linearity, but generally speaking,
But it's not open world, though.
No, but you have free reign of the mansion.
But that's not open world. That's still quite linear.
No, it's definitely not open world. And I remember talking to my younger brother about this, and not my young brother, my younger brother. He's only like 12. When I told him about the new Pokemon coming out, and he was like, "Yeah, it sounds pretty good." I'm like, "Yeah, it's the first time it's gone open world." He's like, "They're all open world." I'm like, "No, Pokemon games have always been very linear. Like, you can go to most places in the world, but the progression of the game is very much point A to point B to point C." And that's what I liked about BioShock Infinite. Resident Evil as well. You're right. It is very much like the series of events to get through the mansion doesn't really change. You have to do this to unlock this, and you progress in a linear fashion. But it's also quite easy to get lost in that game, which is why I consider it not completely linear, if that makes sense. Whereas Resident Evil 4 is very much like corridor to corridor to corridor. But I love that game. And I'll probably replay something like that before I go back to something like, once I'm kind of done with this playthrough of Skyrim, I'm probably not going to touch it again for a while. But I'll pick up Resident Evil 4 any day and play through it from beginning to end, probably in a weekend if it felt like it. I don't know what it is.
The way I see it, though, like, an open world game is the greatest distraction technique from the story given to the player.
That's it.
That's what I think.
And it can negatively impact the effect of that story. We referenced Fallout 4 earlier. The main story seems like it should be the most important thing in the world, but it's not, because you can fuck about and build your own little farm.
And even with The Witcher 3, like, rather than going to rescue Ciri, you can just play Gwent all day.
Yeah, if you want, or do side quests, do Witcher contracts.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, yeah, I find open world narratives to be the problem more often than not.
Oh, I agree with you.
I like every fucking Ubisoft game of like the last 10 years has been an open world game, and I'm like, I'm sure there's exceptions to that, but generally speaking, your Assassin's Creed,
right.
Far Cry.
No, you're right.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't care.
To an extent, Watch Dogs kind of trimmed it back, but even then, Watch Dogs gameplay was just absolutely terrible, and the story was even worse.
Yeah, and like, if I'm going to get an open world, I'd rather a smaller, denser open world. Like Elden Ring is a weird example as well, in that is an open world game. You can go wherever you want in that game, but the progression of the story is still relatively linear. Point A to point B, but you're like, oh, but I can go off and do whatever I want. And like,
yeah, but you'll get your ass handed to you if you go from this place to this place.
And I like that as well. I like that. Whereas like Bethesda games, generally speaking, it's like you can go anywhere on a map in a Bethesda game, and everything like scales with your level. So you're never, while it encourages exploration, it also discourages. It discourages
unnecessary exploration, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So again, it's just a preference. I'm not saying there's anything fundamentally flawed with open world non-linear games. I'm just saying I'll take a linear game over a non-linear one any day.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
If the opportunity was given to me, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that point.
Fairly brief.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, because there's like nowadays that the whole open world thing is what everybody is talking about. Like Breath of the Wild is a great example. Elden Ring, another great example. Ragnarok, so much in the sense that like it's open world, but like everything is still kind of corridor based. Like you're not fully exploring an open world, but like you're seeing enough to make you believe that it's an open world, and that's more than enough, I think. But yeah, the whole open world thing, man, for me, it's a great distraction technique that developers will put into their game to kind of make up for like a lackluster story, I think.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion. I mean,
No.
you take Skyrim for example. Is like the story in Skyrim is not the most
No.
groundbreaking ever.
It's more about the world in
Yeah,
Skyrim,
yeah,
and the smaller stories you kind of experience in between, which is fine. There's a place for that kind of gameplay. Like I said as well, Pokemon recently went open world, and open world fits something like Pokemon because it's this idea of going on a grand adventure. You know, it's you're exploring this world and learning new things about it. It's cool. That's a cool concept, and you're also catching Pokemon. So going exploring and looking for Pokemon makes sense. Some games though go open world, and you're like, no,
it doesn't fit. Like,
no, you're not an open world game. What are you doing? Like, I don't see horror games like Evil Within 2 had a kind of a semi-open world in it, where you could kind of tackle objectives in different orders, and you had side quests and all this kind of stuff. And it's a fine game, but I don't think it's a particularly strong horror game because non-linear horror is very difficult to get right.
Yes. And even then, like some of the Silent Hill games, like even though they weren't very open horror, like you had, like Silent Hill 2 is a great example of that. Like you had the whole city of or the whole town of Silent Hill in front of you.
Yeah.
But it still felt larger than life because you couldn't see a lot of the time what was going on in front of you. So when you came to a new area, it was like, I'm in a new area. And I think like in Silent Hill 4 kind of touched on that, except there were more levels or stages rather than just completely open world.
Yeah, stuff was more segmented, I suppose. Yeah. It's kind of like you're very clearly playing this part of the game.
Exactly. It was much more progression from A to B.
Yeah.
But like open worlds in terms of horror games, like I think the Evil Within 2 it was like this Nexus hub that you're in where you just explore this like disjointed kind of town in this computer simulation or whatever the whole thing was. The whole STEM thing, I don't know.
Yeah, then weird kind of like half and half of this is something like the Metroid games or Metroidvania as a genre, where at the beginning of the game you can only access certain parts of the world, and it's quite linear in that it kind of funnels you through. And and Hollow Knight is an example of this as well. As you unlock more abilities or upgrades for your character, the world gradually opens up more and more. I think I prefer that formula to just a plain open world, because you kind of make mental notes in your mind, like, I can't access this yet, I'm going to come back. God of War Ragnarok is the same. It's like, you know, you get new abilities or new weapons or whatever, and that kind of opens up places you couldn't go to before, so you have an excuse to come back. And the game also kind of funnels you around quite well so that you wind up back in areas you had previously visited naturally through playing the game, which I like. But like Hollow Knight, Metroid Dread as an example, as you play through that game, it funnels you early on fairly linearly until you get more abilities, and then by the time the end game comes around, you can go anywhere you want and unlock stuff.
Alien Isolation as well could be put into that.
Yeah, like Alien Isolation is great as well because it is a linear game, but your options for tackling objectives can be quite interesting and free, and the alien itself causes you to just kind of think on the spot and interact with the world in unique and interesting ways, which I love.
Yeah. And even then the equipment that you can get later on with like the plasma cutter to open new doors.
Yeah, and then you will wind up back in old areas.
It loops you around.
Yeah, it has Metroidvania elements for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that kind of thing because it feels like you're actually in like a living environment.
Yeah, and your character is kind of progressing as well.
Exactly, which is something that like it's hard to pull off, but like when it's pulled off, it's great. You know, it's great when it's done properly. And I think my last point, I'm kind of wrapping up kind of everything that I've kind of mentioned before. But this goes back specifically to online play, right?
Okay.
And I'm probably going to upset a lot of people here, but my point was that online MMOs, an example being Fortnite, are colorful pachinko machines for impressionable players.
Ooh.
And what I mean by that is, like, we mentioned this at kind of at the start of the podcast, where like the whole scandal of the slot machines or whatever they were called, the loot crates or loot boxes, whatever they were called, and it was actually brought to a court of law that it's actually a form of gambling.
Yeah.
But like with Fortnite, like I understand like the player demographic is in this kind of awkward margin between like and I mean like players who are on every day, apart from like Twitch streamers and things like this. a lot of the time the players are between like from 12 to 16, and in order for them to like upgrade their players or upgrade their weapons or their fortresses, you can either play 120 hours of game time or upgrade for €10 or whatever. But the way that it's done in that overly saturated, colourful kind of aesthetic to the game, they'll immediately they'll immediately click on this. And there was a story actually that I read about 2 weeks ago, where, and I don't know how true this might be, but basically it happened in England in the West Midlands, where a young boy of about 10 years old ran up a bill of £420 sterling because his dad's credit card had been set up to their Microsoft account.
Jesus.
And this kid was just buying stuff constantly for Fortnite, and they couldn't get a refund on it because it was an in-game purchase, and you can't refund an in-game purchase. So I suppose like the point I want to make is, and you see it all over TikTok and this kind of thing, like TikTok for me is like probably one of the most poisonous accounts, the most poisonous apps I've ever come across. It's absolutely abhorrent. I despise it. I despise it. But you see these people doing these Fortnite dances and things like this, and it's like, this is like their culture now, where they're paying for flashy stuff in game, and like maybe that's like, it should be down to parental control or something like that. But whenever I see these things happening, it's like, my God, it's actually horrible. But the fact that it's like, it's only, €10 that they bought for like a dance emote or whatever it might be. But it's just, I just think that like the term loot box has just been kind of like evolving.
Well, remember Battlefront 2? When that came out, and it was like, the progression in that game was essentially non-existent unless you were willing to pay for it.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a prime example of how that culture is just purely toxic and anti-consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny as well, because these issues have actually bled into single-player experiences, non-online games. Deus Ex Mankind Divided, you could buy level-up points, praxis kits, to progress your character, and it's like, that completely breaks the immersion, the level curve. Because you're like, okay,
why have a level up system anyway if you could just buy them for £10?
Yeah, I'm going to buy out all the skill points in the game, and then that way my character can do everything from the start. And it's just, why bother playing the game?
And even then, like there was even like other games that you had to buy, like Konami are really guilty of this, where like you had to buy save slots for Metal Gear Survive. Yeah, you had to.
My God,
you only had one save slot to your name, and in order to like buy the other two, it was like an extra €10 or €15 or something like this.
Absurd stuff, like
absolutely crazy. Azura's Wrath is another one where you could, like, in order to play like the last level, the proper canonical level of the game, you had to pay an extra £20 or something like that.
And it was literally called the True Ending DLC.
The True Ending, yeah.
And it's like, so wait, the game I paid, and that was considered on disc DLC, which was a big controversy at the time as well, because it's like, the content is already there.
It's locked off by a paywall.
Yeah, and it's like, that is fucking scandalous.
Now, I know I'm using like MMOs as like a classic example, but like you hear more about this, but like there are obvious examples in single player games.
Oh yeah, true. But it is the online.
But it's how slithery they are when they're targeting these kids. Saying, if you want like the next armor level or next color scheme for your character, then this is it. Destiny is a great example of that for mature players like you and me.
Yeah, mature.
Yeah. like if you wanted to like get a color scheme or X, Y, and Z, you had to fork out more real time money rather than just playing for it in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's shocking. Like,
battle passes are very prevalent as well now, where it's like, oh, looky, the free version you get like X amount of cosmetics and other things, but if you pay for the main version, we'll give you all the good stuff.
Yeah,
and that's very true. It
falls under the lines of like day one DLC as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's particularly egregious in games where you already have to pay for the game itself. Like, it's one thing to get a free game and be like, okay, they need to support the developers somehow and have some form of monetization in game. You're kind of like, I don't like it, but I get it.
Yeah.
But then you have, buy this full price game and then also pay all of these like microtransaction-y bullshit to get stuff. It's like, I paid for the game. Like, why are you locking all this other stuff behind a paywall when I already bought you? It's that gets on my nips.
Yeah, like when it's like when you have to buy things like to properly progress the story or do like that kind of thing. It's just like, man, it's so shady. Like the business practice is so shady. Like DLC, I can understand if you want to like get stuff like Hollow Knight, for example. The like there's 3 DLCs for that, and like that's arguably like 20 or so more hours for one singular piece of DLC. Like that's you're supporting them. Like The Witcher as well is another one where the Blood and Wine DLC is like 40 hours, and it's just, you know, that I can understand, but that's
content. It's actual playable.
It's playable content.
Yeah, like, and I know, kind of in the PS3 360 era, DLC was a fairly new concept, and sometimes they kind of fumbled the ball a bit with that. So there's an element of kind of like, okay, they were still figuring it out, but like once we hit PS4, Xbox One, I'm sorry, after that it's inexcusable. It's like, if you're going to release, like, one thing that pissed me off was Arkham Knight before it came out. They released so Arkham Knight got its announcement trailer, which was completely CGI. There was no gameplay, no indication of what the actual story was, and the trailer included buy the season pass. It's like, I don't even know what your game looks like yet. You haven't actually shown gameplay footage or screenshots or anything.
Right.
Now, it's an Arkham game. The fundamentals are probably similar to what you had experienced before. But I'm sorry, I'm not buying the season pass for something when I don't even know what the final product is even going to look like.
And this was already like a title that came after 3 other titles. Like,
there was
City
Asylum
and Origins.
Exactly. Like, so it was obviously going to be a sequel to them, and that's fine. It's Arkham Knight, and it was the conclusion to the franchise as we knew it, and that's fine as well. Whatever about the game itself, I hate this idea of like, pre-order the game, pre-order the season pass. They don't even tell you what's in the season pass, what content will be included, and what the game is itself. Like, that is a practice that has really pissed me off to no end. Is season passes prior to the game's release? It's like, why should I buy new content for the game before I've actually played it and told you if I like it?
Yeah,
like, what the fuck is this shit?
I know, and so many people buy into that though, and that's where they make their millions. Like,
and like, I've been guilty of pre-orders before, but I've been burned.
I've never pre-ordered anything.
See, I pre-ordered Aliens Colonial Marines on the Xbox 360. I brought it back within 24 hours. No, I didn't go up like, I demand a refund. I was like, I'm selling this shit because it's garbage. It's not GameStop's fault. The game was crap.
Exactly. The game wasn't damaged. Like, when they gave it to you, the game was damaged when you booted it up.
They gave me the product they were provided.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's not their fault.
Oh man, that game was atrocious though.
Awful
Jesus
stuff.
Christ.
And that's why I don't pre-order games anymore.
The same was said with No Man's Sky.
Yeah. I'll wait. I'll wait till day one reviews. I pre-ordered No Man's Sky as well, like a fool. But now, no, I'll wait. Game comes out, I'll look at day one reviews, because day one reviews tell you what it's like without like day one patches and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if it's not good without the day one patch, how much like that day one patch?
What was that new one that came out, the Callisto Protocol? And it was just like, like, as soon as I saw it, like, I was like, it's Dead Space.
Yeah, it's crappier Dead Space.
It's Dead Space. Not that it's crappier Dead Space. I think that's, like, I wouldn't say it's crappier. What I would say was, like, it's just a rinse, wash, and repeat of what Dead Space did, because it's the same dude who did it.
Yeah, Glenn
And
Scofield.
it's a formula that works, though.
Yeah, but see, apparently, and I haven't played it myself, but just generally online, people are like, yeah, nah, it's not good. From what I've seen. I was like, oh, that's a shame.
Yeah. It looks good. Like, I mean, like, graphically,
Visually,
it looks visually, like, it looks good, but like, gameplay-wise, it's probably just the same rinse, wash, and repeat that we got with Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2. Yeah. So that was my last point. I just think that MMOs and how all these, like, just these, like, upgraded pachinko machine predatorial practices on younger players is just, I don't find it acceptable, to be honest with you. So
totally get you.
Those are my points, and thank you for listening to them. And I'm just interested now and curious as to what your last point is going to be.
Yeah, I've been saving this is the one that'll get my opinion card taken away from me, I think. This will be the one people will be like, no, you're nothing you say is valid anymore. And I hope you don't think this, and I hope people online don't think I'm just saying this to be argumentative or contradictory or anything like that.
Go for it.
And it also, I know I'm setting this up big, and it may sound after this point and something else I've mentioned before that I have a bit of a vendetta, but I don't. I swear, I'm not biased. I mean, everyone has some form of inherent bias, but I promise I'm not just being a contrarian for the sake of it with this.
Okay, hang on. Let me brace myself. Just remember, Shephard.
Yeah,
I've been your friend for nearly 15 years now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's hope this doesn't change that. I don't think The Last of Us is a masterpiece.
I agree with you.
Oh shit!
I agree with you. I agree with you. Now, the term masterpiece, though, is such a blanket statement, though.
Yeah, how do you define a masterpiece?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't, because nothing is a masterpiece. No game is a masterpiece.
Well,
no piece of music is a masterpiece. Because
I think something can be a masterpiece to you in that it resonates with you on such a personal level that it kind of ticks all the relevant boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
but
fine.
In what way are you saying that The Last of Us isn't a masterpiece? The way you're describing it.
So a lot of people, Last of Us, it's a 10 out of 10 game, and I don't agree. There's no such thing as a perfect game, but
no, it's not.
Whatever. I don't do ranking systems anyway. That's not my area. If someone else calls it 10 out of 10, that's their prerogative.
IGN.
Whatever. IGN. We're calling out everyone tonight. So for The Last of Us, I do love it. I will say that I love that game. I really do. But if I never played The Last of Us again for the rest of my days, I probably wouldn't care.
Really?
I think the story is very good. I think it's excellent. I think it's well produced. I think it's well written, well paced, well acted. Generally speaking, I think the production value on the story is top tier. Excellent stuff. The story itself is very run of the mill. It is the story of and God of War is fundamentally the same kind of concept. It's an older, gruff dad figure. And I'm talking about modern God of War, not the classics. Same kind of story, but I find Kratos and Atreus to be more engaging than Joel and Ellie. And I like Joel and Ellie. I think Lee and Clementine in The Walking Dead by Telltale are a better duo than Lee and Ellie as well. I don't know what it is. I like I like Joel and Ellie. I really like Joel and Ellie. I think they have great chemistry. Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson play off each other so goddamn well. But, and this is why I can't consider the game a masterpiece personally. Like, the story is really good, solid story, but the actual plot itself, whatever. For me, it's the gameplay. Gameplay's shit. I actively feel like the gameplay in The Last of Us is kind of garbage.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not a believer in gameplay is the most important part. However,
it gets very samey.
Yeah, like Joel is no different at the end of the game than he is at the start of the game in terms of gameplay. His character has changed. I wouldn't say grown. I would say changed. Because he is still selfish at the game's close. He is everything he is doing for his own.
But he wasn't selfish at the beginning of the game. Well,
like
no, you could be right though. You could be right because there is that
after
scene
Sarah's death. Yeah,
but even before that, when you were driving from Joel's house with Sarah and Tommy, and you see the burning barn, and you drive past these hitchhikers,
and like, we're not stopping for help.
and Sarah's like, we could have helped them.
Yeah.
So,
and
that was fight or flight though. That wasn't like he was selfish. That was like, I'm going to protect the people. But then again, it's still the same thing.
It's Joel's. It's. I'm not saying. Like, I don't mean selfish in that it's wrong. I just mean Joel will always look out for his and the people around him's best interests above all else.
The thing about Joel is though, like, I understand what you're saying. I do get what you're saying, but I don't think. And I may be in the minute amount of people who think about this or who agree with this statement. I don't think that Joel really cared, or not even cared, that he didn't have other people's best interest at heart who were around him. I think he had his own best interest at heart.
Yeah.
So he wants to look out for Ellie because he's selfish that he couldn't protect his daughter during the outbreak, you know?
Yeah, and Ellie becomes a surrogate daughter, and it's like, oh, I can do it over.
I think, though, the only person he really cared about was Tess.
Yeah, it's sad. That was sad.
You know, but going back to the point that you made there, sorry to cut across you.
Yeah, so for me, like, I like the story. I don't love the story. I really like the story, and as a game, I think I do really like it. Maybe I said love before. I'm starting to think the more I talk about this, the less I love the game. I don't enjoy the gameplay. I think the gameplay is too basic. It is too unappealing. It is like combat encounters at the start of the game are almost exactly the same as combat encounters at the end of the game. The level design isn't very interesting. This is something I will actually credit The Last of Us 2 with, which is a game I don't like.
I don't like that game at all.
I don't like it, but I think the gameplay was elevated to a higher standard than the first game.
Yeah.
In some ways. Like, Ellie as a character has more versatility and more options in combat. They improved kind of the level layouts and things like that as well, so there's more options in combat, which I like. But with the first game, like, it's only in the expansion the Left Behind DLC.
Left Behind, yeah. You're playing as Ellie, and you're with her friend at the time, isn't it?
Yeah, her friend.
Yeah. I can't remember the friend's name.
I can't either. Well, I liked her friend. That was cool. But it's only in the Left Behind campaign, which is an add-on after the fact, where you can pit humans and infected against each other at all. Yeah. And it's like that feels like something that should have been there from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And the second game does that quite well. There's elements of like the survivors versus infected, and you can kind of play them off each other for your own advantage. And I like that. But the first game is just such a bare bones gameplay system. And again, I don't think gameplay has to be king. As I said, I love like Telltale's The Walking Dead, which is gameplay wise very simple. But I find the story of that game more engaging because there's still choice and elements of like interactivity within it. In terms of like your character progressing through, and like Lee is a predetermined character, but there's still like Lee's choices that you make in the game don't impact Lee; they impact the characters around Lee, which I like.
And just kind of going back on the Left Behind thing, I think it was Riley was Ellie's.
Riley, yeah,
it was Riley, and like in the short time that you get to spend with Riley, you learn so much about how Ellie wanted to keep her alive, and they are ambushed by the runners and things like that. And that's when Ellie finds out that she's immune and she has to watch Riley die. And also there's like her character kind of has a shift there. But Joel doesn't really have a shift until I think that moment when he realizes he can't give Ellie up because he's selfish, that he doesn't want to give her up. But like, we could talk about Joel's character for another podcast. Like that could go on for hours on end, because like he's such a dualistic kind of character. He's not good and he's not bad. He's like that. He's kind of tithering on one. He wants to be a good. Thing. Yeah, he wants to be a good character. He wants to do right by his own morals. But I do agree with you on the whole story thing. But I think gameplay. Like the gameplay itself, I could understand maybe they wanted to take it back to that primal kind of thing where it's just hand to hand at the beginning of the game, and then when it came into like the combat scenarios when you get your own firearms and things like this, it didn't feel like there was much weight to the situation around you. What I can commend the second game was like when you shoot an enemy character and there's other enemies around, they'll shout the person's name like, "Oh my god, Steven, your leg!" You know, and it feels like shit. I'm after taking down a person. I haven't taken down an enemy. That's a person.
It's not just code on a screen.
Exactly. And
I don't know, like it's one of those things where I definitely think the second game story went down, gameplay went up. We've talked about The Last of Us 2 before though. So I'm not going to get into that too much, but it's just, for me, it's largely down to the fact that The Last of Us gameplay doesn't engage me in the slightest.
That's fair. But story-wise, are you still on the same?
Story-wise, I enjoy it. I think it's a good story. I think it's well presented. And I think, cool. I like the story. But it also feels like story and gameplay are just, I don't know, they're very distinctly removed from each other for me.
I agree with you.
Which is a shame. And again, like God of War, the 2018 God of War, I think implemented story and gameplay a lot better in a lot of ways. And it came out 5 years after. So it learned a lot from The Last of Us. There's no denying that. But as an example, in that game, Kratos' son Atreus, as the game goes on, becomes slightly more emboldened by the fact that there's a revelation about his past, and he starts to become kind of a dickhead.
Slightly more cocky as well.
Exactly, yeah. He's more sure of himself and everything. And that affects the gameplay. When you press square in that game, Atreus shoots an arrow. But at this part of the game, he starts ignoring your commands. you, the player, feel Kratos' frustration as a character. Now, The Last of Us did do that as well, once. At the scene in the zoo, when you meet the giraffes. So Joel goes to like boost Ellie up, which you've done so many times up to that point in the game. Great scene, fantastic scene. So Joel goes to like, oh, I'll give you a boost up, and Ellie's busy doing something else. She's distracted. Then eventually you push her up. She goes to drop a ladder
and runs off when she sees.
Yeah, she knocks it over. Yeah, and runs off. And it's like, okay, like that feeds into the gameplay. That was a great moment in the game.
Scene, man, that scene.
Yeah, great scene. It's gorgeous scene.
Absolutely, and I think stunning, beautiful.
I think that's where the game excels. Is those?
It's a real human moment. Yeah,
exactly. But I can't consider it a masterpiece because, at least for me, because the gameplay is just not engaging. It's like I'm only playing through the gameplay segments to get to the next bit of story.
And you can actually see the next landmark that you have to get to because it's painted with like a gold kind of paint job in the distance, that kind of thing. Like when you're trying to get to like I think there's a place you have to get to with Tess and Ellie. It's like where you're supposed to meet with the fireflies, and you're up after crossing these two buildings after crossing a ladder bridge or something like that, and every kind of main area in the game is painted with like a gold kind of hue, so you know that's where where you need to go. It
catches your eye naturally.
Yeah, and that's what you're not paying that much attention to, like the winding pathways among these places.
Yeah,
but no, I'd agree with you. I would agree with you.
Yeah, it's just like, again, I like the game. I really do. I cannot overstate that. So I hope people aren't too pissed off with my opinion on this.
Hope we didn't annoy too many people. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, jeez. Oh, I mean, we've definitely stepped on some toes today.
I think so.
I went after the Sonic fandom for like a good 10 minutes, and I'm sorry about that because again, I'm a casual enjoyer of Sonic and Pokemon. I like my Pokemon, so I'm sorry about the fans of that.
That's it. Like people should have the right to enjoy what they enjoy, and they don't need somebody to say you can't enjoy this because you're just a fanboy of what came before. It's like, no, I enjoy it for this, and
that's it. We're not telling people. The last thing we want to do is presume we are right about everything. We're not. We are two opinionated guys who just wanted to voice some of our opinions that might step on people's toes. But ultimately, if you, as Joker said, if you like something, you like something. No one can take that away from you.
No one can take it away.
And that is not, and we don't want to do that. So don't take away our opinions either. We're gonna upload this to our brand new Spotify podcast account.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also going to be shared on the YouTube channel. So I actually don't know. I don't think you can Spotify comment, but you can comment on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube, let us know what you think.
Absolutely.
I suppose I don't know if we've ever asked this before, but if you've any suggestions for ideas,
I don't know.
Like
you can always drop us a message on our Instagram page. We're at the Save Point Official. Thank you very much, Christopher, for dropping us a message there. And always a pleasure to have a chat with you guys.
We're happy to kind of try out new things, to talk about new subjects. We have I think we've ideas for days already, but there's always something new. Like maybe if there's a series of games you'd like us to try and look at, if we can.
Absolutely.
We can't guarantee every idea is going to be acted upon because we are, as kind of described in an update video we did recently, we're kind of on a budget for this kind of thing.
But so we will do what we can, of course.
Yeah,
we will do what we can.
We'll and you know we're always up for trying out new things anyway. So and this is proof of that. We're trying something new. We're reaching.
This alone is a monumental thing happening. This alone is huge. But I suppose
I haven't been this excited in ages.
I suppose signing off on the first actual podcast episode.
Oh my god!
To everybody listening, thank you so much. And signing off on the first official podcast of The Save Point, I have been your host, Joker.
And I have been your co-host, Shephard.
Take it
Thank
easy,
you all
guys.
so much. Woo!